Welcome to the African Weekly Roundup, a weekly program every Sunday here on HORUFADHI Media, where I discuss the latest news and events across the African continent. I'm Sultan Mohammed, your host and producer here on HORUFADHI Media. We hope you find this program very informative. Please like, share, and for similar content, do subscribe to HORUFADHI Media. Also, do subscribe to HORUFADHI Media Group's second channel, known as HORUFADHI TV, where you can find exclusive programs such as Behind the Scenes and Mahahe Salah, among others. And last but not least, do follow myself, Sultan Mohammed, Suleiman Hashi, Yasin Abdi, and the wider HORUFADHI Media team on our social media platforms that should appear on the screen any moment. Let's get straight into the news, and let's start over in Congo, where suspected militiamen carrying guns and knives killed at least 15 people and burned hundreds of homes during an attack overnight on a market in a town in eastern Congo, local officials and residents said on Friday. The raid near the town of Dujugu is the latest in a string of violent attacks in the eastern Ituri province, where rival groups fight over land and resources. The death toll was confirmed by local chief Richard Venner and by a local civil society member, and the attackers were likely from the CODECO militia, whose ranks are drawn mainly from the ethnic Lendu farming community, which carries out regular attacks on Hema herders in eastern Ituri province, Venner said. Now, this militia has not been able to comment on any of the events and have not confirmed or denied any of the attacks. Now, the attack took place not far from the site of another militia massacre in February, in which at least 60 people were killed at a camp for displaced people. Much of eastern Congo has seen a spike in violence this year, frustrating residents who say the army and the United Nations peacekeeping mission, known as MONUSCO, is not doing enough to keep people safe. At least one person was killed in the eastern town of Beni this week when shots were fired during another protest against the UN mission, and in this situation, shots were fired during another protest against the UN mission in Congo. Protesters on motorbikes had gathered and blocked the UN convoy in Beni, a continuation of violent demonstrations against the mission that have killed dozens, including civilians, peacekeepers, and Congolese police elsewhere in eastern Congo since July. Now, the UN peacekeeping mission troops have been accused of retaliating with force during the recent protests against them in eastern cities of Butembo and Goma, which saw hundreds of protesters throw rocks and petrol bombs and set fire to UN buildings. The protests have been spurred by complaints that the peacekeepers or the peacekeeping mission, the UN peacekeeping mission, has failed to protect civilians against the militia, as the militia's groups continue to engage in violent acts that massacre dozens of people. The mission has been deployed to Congo for more than 2 decades and has cost more than $1 billion per year, but we still are yet to see anything that has been achieved in the Congo by this mission. Now let's move over to Angola, where Angola's constitutional court made a final ruling on Thursday to dismiss a complaint filed by the runner-up in August 24th election, seeking to annul the results that gave victory to the ruling MPLA party. Now, after the country's most closest fought election, the Electoral Commission declared last week that the People's Movement for the Liberation of Angola, or MPLA, the winner, prolonging its nearly 5 decades of uninterrupted rule and handing President João Lourenço a second term. Now, just over 51% of voters had supported the MPLA, it said, according to the Electoral Commission of Angola. The National Union for the Total Independence of Angola, or UNITA, its longtime opponent and former civil war enemy, took about 44%, its best result on record, also according to the Commission. Now the UNITA leader, Adalberto Costa Jr., rejected the results, citing discrepancies between the Electoral Commission's count, and his party's own tally. He accused the Electoral Commission, which he said is mostly controlled by the MPLA, of fraud. Now, the Commission has repeatedly said the process was fair and transparent. Now, according to the opposition party's parallel count, it got 49.5% of the vote, and the MPLA, the ruling party, got 48.2%. A parallel count by the civic movement Mudi, which monitored the process, also showed UNITA slightly ahead. And the court, which is led by the former member of MPLA, made an initial ruling on Monday against the complaint filed by UNITA. But Thursday's decision is final and cannot be appealed, paving the way for Lourenço to be sworn in next week. And the court chief, or the head of the court at the time, Lorenda Cruzado, told reporters that the evidence was analysed, and based on that, they decided to reject the case. Now, UNITA and other opposition parties called for peaceful demonstrations to protest against what they described as election irregularities. Now, among other issues, there were only 1,300 observers to cover a country twice the size of France. Around 2.7 million deceased people were included in the electoral roll, according to allegations, and the MPLA was given more airtime than others, according to opposition parties. Any updates on Angola will be given here on the African Weekly program. Now over to South Africa, where flooding caused by the collapse of a mine dam wall in South Africa's Free State province swept away houses and cars this afternoon, the provincial government said, killing one person and injuring another 40. Now, the disaster occurred in the diamond mining town of Jagersfontein at around 6 a.m. or 4 a.m. GMT, the government said, forcing officials to evacuate scores of residents to the nearby farms. Now, one person was declared dead after their body was recovered, while 40 people, including one pregnant woman and 4 individuals with fractured limbs, have been taken to the hospital for treatment. Now, the government said in a statement that search and rescue efforts are continuing at the dormant diamond mine, which was once owned by the Bears, a unit of Anglo-American companies. Now, the Minister of Mineral Resources and Energy told reporters that the 9 houses were swept away, while 20 were completely damaged by flooding from the tailing dam. Now, state-owned power utility Eskom said in a separate statement that it lost a bulk of electricity supply in the area when its Rightcool substation was engulfed by mud and aims to restore supply to the city before the end of the day. Now, the flooding damaged cell phone towers, hitting communications and affected drinking water, while some roads were cut off. Many sheep have also been washed away, non-governmental organization Gift of the Givers said. Now, Vodacom, speaking to the media outlet Reuters, said that it's 2 of its impacted base station sites are now back online after deploying generators to power them, while rival MTN, which is another mobile operator in South Africa, said it is looking for an alternative way to access a tower it shares with others in order to restore power and services. Now over to the unstable Mali, where Mali's interim president wants a mutually beneficial solution to end a diplomatic row over 46 Ivorian soldiers detained in Mali, noting that the Ivory Coast has given asylum to political figures wanted by his junta, a state television said on Saturday. Now, the Ivorian soldiers were detained at Mali's international airport in the capital Bamako on July 10th. Mali's junta said they had flown in without permission and were seen as mercenaries. Ivory Coast, on the other hand, has repeatedly requested their release and say that the soldiers had been deployed as part of a security and logistics support contract signed with the UN peacekeeping mission in Mali. Now, this last week, Mali released 2 of those soldiers, and they were then flown allegedly back to Ivory Coast. Now, Mali's interim president Assimi Goïta has said that he made it clear when Ivory Coast was requesting the release of his soldiers that it continues to serve the political asylum for certain Malian political figures who are, according to the president, subject of international arrest warrant. And this was broadcasted on Mali State TV. Now, more updates on the diplomatic row between Ivory Coast and Mali will be given here on the program in the coming weeks. Now over to Burundi, where Burundi's parliament on Wednesday swore in a new prime minister a week after the president warned that some unnamed people were plotting to overthrow his government. In a tweet, Parliament said it had unanimously voted to approve the new Prime Minister previously, who served as Minister for Security and Internal Affairs, following his nomination by the President. Now, the President, who replaces previous President Alain Bonioni, is under UN sanctions for his role in quashing demonstrations during the political unrest in 2015. Now, the Constitution, the President holds the country's main executive power. Now, in 2015, the European Union imposed sanctions and travel curbs and asset freezes on the president and 3 others after accusing them of engaging in activities undermining democracy ahead of a disputed re-election that year of then President Pierre Nkurunziza. The Central African nation is of 11 million people. It's one of the poorest countries, and its politics have over the years been marked by widespread human rights violations, including assassinations, killings, disappearances, torture, gang rape of alleged government opponents, and this is all according to the United Nations. And finally, over to Tunisia, where the Ennahda party, the main opposition party, has said it will boycott December polls to replace a parliament dissolved by President Kais Saied. Now, the vote is set for nearly a year and a half after Saied suspended Ennahda-nominated assembly and sacked the government, later pushing through a constitution enshrining his own one-man rule. In a statement released, Ahmed Najib Chajibi, the head of the front which made up the partisan movement opposed to Saied, he said the following: the National Salvation Front has definitively decided to boycott the upcoming elections. He said the move was in response to an electoral law written by Saied alone, according to his words, and part of an, I quote, coup against the constitutional legitimacy. Now, Saied's power grab was welcomed by many Tunisians, tired of what they saw as fractious and corrupt system established after the 2011 revolution. Now, that's all the top stories this week on the program. Please tune in for next week for weekly updates across the African continent.